Welcome to In the Cut, the show that gets you up close and personal with BN and our community. Good afternoon, everyone, or morning, wherever you are located. Welcome to In the Cut, the show that gets you up close and personal with BN and our community. I'm Mandisa Thomas, founder and president of BlackNonbelievers, as well as your interim host for today's show. In the Cut is a production of BlackNonbelievers, a 501c3 organization. Headquartered in the Atlanta area, we connect with other Blacks and allies who are living free of religion and might otherwise be shunned by family and friends by providing a caring, friendly, and informative community. Instead of accepting dogma, we determine truth and morality through reason and evidence. The mission of BlackNonbelievers is to provide secular fellowship, nurture and support non-believers in coming out, also known as open identification, encourage pride in non-religious identities, to educate the public on the history and current state of non-belief in the Black community, and to organize events and charitable causes. BN welcomes all regardless of age, gender identity, sexual identity, national origin, or racial identity. However, our content and work prioritizes Black non-religious voices. So today, we are still celebrating Black History Month. We are celebrating it all month. And today, I wanted to give just a few Black history facts and to honor Audre Lorde, a feminist author and poet who was born on this day in New York City, which is also my hometown. And she passed away in 1992. Very, very influential in the feminist movement, and especially among Black women and among Black women authors. So we pay tribute to Audre Lorde today on her date of birth. And also, I would like to spotlight, for those of you who aren't aware, I lived and breathed Black history growing up. And this person who I'm about to say a few words on is someone who I read about and heard of often, who was Granville T. Woods, who was born in Columbus, Ohio, and died in New York. He is an inventor known as the Black Edison, and his field of invention was primarily in electrical engineering. He patented and improved on multiple inventions, including the third rail, the telephone, and the telegraph, which is a communication and mobility, which a lot of these things we use today. And I think that it's important to spotlight this because there are a lot of, if you aren't familiar with Black inventors and creators, especially during Black history, it's important to educate yourself on that. Because there's new history being made every day, especially as we prepare for the future. And speaking of communication, I just wanted to just take a moment to just say a few words about it. Communication is very important to me personally, and also how we do things as an organization. As someone who has, as my background is in hospitality and management, it is important, and organizing. Effective communication is extremely important. And when there are conflicts and problems that arise, it is important to encourage collaboration and reintegration rather than coercion and isolation when possible. And when there are public conversations and public discourse, that means that there can and will be disagreements. But it's often how we conduct ourselves and we carry ourselves and how we disagree and how we are communicating with each other. Are we listening to each other? Are we actually countering if there's disagreement and discourse? are we countering to understand each other, to and this does not just simply apply to religion. Many of us think that once we leave religion, then that's it, that there is nothing more to learn, and that isn't true. The same skepticism and evidence that we apply towards religion can and should be applied towards everything that we do, and in a way that is empathetic, even if we are disagreeing. So, if your first reaction is to argue and throw ad hominems and throw insults, then that is ineffective, and it makes it harder for us to hear, communicate, and understand each other if this communication, if it only results in us arguing, or we're insulting each other. It's impossible to move forward. And when we're talking about the spaces of justice, when we're talking about spaces of reconciliation, as human beings, we don't ever want to deny our emotions and our feelings, and that is absolutely important. It is important for us to acknowledge that. However, if we are not being objective, if everything simply becomes a shouting match, or when someone disagrees, you just counterattack with insults, then it's impossible to move forward. And people who are on the receiving ends do not have to respond to that. And I think it's important to just highlight that when it comes to public discourse. And this is also where we show our humanism and we show our empathy for people, especially when there are areas where there is little information and there are things that we need to learn. And as more information comes to light, it's important to review everything critically and to ask the necessary questions, especially if things aren't making sense. And if they do, it's okay for us to work through it and talk through it, because that is how we move forward. This is, again, this is what we encourage for believers and non-believers alike. We don't actually tell you what to think. It is about that you should be thinking and thinking critically. And in our communities, that is especially important. We are already at a disadvantage when it comes to certain aspects of community building and upliftment. And it's important. And there are sometimes hard decisions that need to be made. And we definitely understand that. However, it is important for us to address them in ways where we can all move forward and build each other up rather than tear each other down. And especially as we are in the month of, we are celebrating Blackness, Black history, which will move into the future. These are principles that we definitely uphold here at this organization, and we will continue to do so into the future. So with that, again, I will say that reason and evidence will always prevail, even as we show compassion and even as we continue to build our community. And so with that, I would like to say thank you very much for listening to my sort of spiel here. Please take this time to continue to educate yourself on Black history, especially as it pertains to secularism, humanism, and non-belief. And I have a very special announcement later on in the show, and we hope you will stay tuned. It is now my pleasure to introduce and welcome our special guest today, Dr. Anthony B. Pinn, also known as Tony, who is originally from the great state of New York, like myself. He is a pioneer working at the intersections of African American religion, constructive theology, and humanist thought. Tony is the Agnes Cullen Arnold Professor of Humanities and Professor of Religious Studies at Rice University. He is also the founder and executive director of the Center for Engaged Research and Collaborative Learning in Houston, Texas, and director of research for the Institute of Humanist Studies in Washington, D.C. Tony graduated from Columbia University with a BA in 1986 and earned his PhD in the study of religion at Harvard University in 1994. Today, Tony's research interests span theory and method in the study of religion, Black religious aesthetics, religion and popular culture, and African American humanism. Tony is the author of many books, including Writing God's Obituary, How a Good Methodist Became a Better Atheist, and When Color Blindness Isn't the Answer, Humanism and the Challenge of Race. He is also an editor of many book series, monographs, and volumes. Tony has also been honored with multiple awards, including the Harvard Humanist of the Year in 2006 and the Unitarian Universalist Humanist Association's Person of the Year in 2017. He is also the host of the podcast Pinn Drop, which is available on OnlySky Media. Welcome, welcome, welcome to the show, Tony.
Oh, it's a delight to be with you. Looking forward to chatting with you.
Thank you so much. Now, I mean, we could have gone much longer with your bio and your work, which is expansive and amazing. But in the as we do with the show, we like to start by asking our guests to tell our viewers about your journey with religion, your upbringing, and how you came to where you are today.
Sure. Well, I grew up in Buffalo, New York. My mother's side of the family moved from places like Halifax, North Carolina to Buffalo. My father's family moved from places like Dinwiddie, Virginia to Buffalo in search of greater economic opportunities. Many of my family members during that period worked at Bethlehem Steel, right outside of Buffalo. My father's side of the family, not particularly religious, but my mother's side of the family, deeply religious. So as a child, I spent a lot of time in church. Initially, we went to my grandfather's Baptist church where he was a deacon. But my mother decided that it didn't make sense to have her children in an environment in which women had limited positions, not because they didn't have ability, but because of gender. So we started attending a non-denominational church a little closer to our home in Buffalo, right in the inner city. And we spent a whole lot of time there. And one day, after, I'm a little kid now, keep that in mind, after my nap during church, I woke up and all these folks were walking to the front of the church. So I asked my mother, what are they doing? Why are they walking to the church? Why are they walking to the front of the church? And she said, they are joining the church. And I told her, well, I want to do that too. So she said, okay, go about your business. So I walked to the front and told them I was Anthony Bernard Pinn and that I wanted to join the church. It wasn't long after that during a Sunday school session, and this was a small church, so the pastor in charge was also my Sunday school teacher. He went around the room asking us, what do you want to be when you grow up? And the normal stuff. I want to be a doctor, a lawyer. I want to be president. When he got to me, I said, I want to be a preacher. Now, I'm not quite certain why I said that. Maybe it has something to do with the stature, the visibility, the importance of this person. And maybe it was my way as little Tony Pinn of claiming space, claiming importance. And his response was, okay, we start next week. So childhood in the church was over for me. I sat up in the pulpit. I was responsible for lining the hymns, giving prayers, blessing the offering, opening the doors of the church. Ministry was starting for me. Now, I could not stay outside once the street lights came on, but I'm in church inviting people to give themselves to Christ. We eventually got a new minister from Philadelphia who was known for growing churches. And that's when my formal movement into ministry began. I preached my first sermon as a young man. Now, there wasn't much I could do. I wasn't old enough to vote, but I'm telling folks about their soul salvation. Went through this process. it was time to go to college, and I needed to get out of Buffalo. I wanted some space away from Buffalo. I wanted to think bigger than I felt Buffalo allowed. The minister of the church had just been reassigned to a church in Bedford-Stuyvesant. And so I took that as a calling from the Lord. I had gotten to Columbia and decided that's where I was going to go. And I was on fire for this. My attitude was I was going to go to New York City and I was going to save everybody at Columbia for the Lord. I get there and it's blowing my mind. I'm encountering folks who didn't understand scripture as being God's word, authoritative. I encountered professors who treated it like it was just another book, and this was blowing my mind. I had come from a rather conservative evangelical background. I had graduated from a high school that was a feeder program for Bob Jones University, Liberty Baptist. So extremely fundamentalist in outlook. And this was blowing my mind. I'm encountering folks who didn't give the church a second thought, who practiced other traditions, and they were cool with that. And the thing that really got me was they often treated me better than the folks in the church. This church was in Bedford-Stuyvesant, and I was in New York. I was a college student as crack cocaine was gaining ground, and so death and misery were all around. And within the context of the church, it felt to me as we gave folks nothing to help them survive this traumatic environment. We gave them nothing to deal with the economic and political consequences of anti-Black racism. So I'm being challenged by this. And my sense of theology, my sense of ministry is beginning to change. It was no longer, with time, it was no longer about personal salvation. I was moving in the direction of folks like Adam Clayton Powell Jr., and the church was an opportunity. It was a location from which we did work that transformed the real material circumstances of Black people. That's how I was beginning to think about ministry, but I was still uncomfortable. It wasn't seeming to me as if the church was really providing anything that altered life, that we were actually training people to be okay with their misery. I was finding this challenging, extremely challenging, finding it hard to understand ministry as being relevant. I had to rethink it. And I knew I had to get out of New York in order to do that, because folks said this church needed Reverend Pinn to have answers, not questions. So I decided to go somewhere where ministry was a secondary consideration. It was about ideas. It was about questions. Questions were valued. So I decided on Harvard Divinity School. And while I was there in the Master of Divinity program, I had an obligation to work in a context that was consistent with my sense of ministry. So I started working at a church in Roxbury, across the street from a park. And you might think that this park was where kids would go to chill and hang out, but this was a park that was notorious for drug deals and prostitution. And I asked the minister in charge, what are we going to do? What are we going to do? Because I'm youth pastor at this church and I'm encountering kids who are having an easier time describing their death than thinking of a bright future. They had an easier time articulating their eulogy, easier time doing that than they had projecting and describing a future. And I'm asking, what do we do about this? Kids who are dying because they got the wrong color on. What do we do about this? And the minister's response was, well, in the pulpit, let the folks get happy with you. That was code for hoop. Get energetic in the pulpit, but get excited about what? Folks were dying. And what was our answer? And it reached a point for me where I had to think about this differently. There are lots of things I was willing to do, but I was not going to be a hypocrite. And I no longer believed that theism was a viable and vital component of life for Black folks, that it actually offered us something that was useful. So I had to make a decision. Was I going to stay in the church and safeguard a tradition I no longer held as true? Or was I going to leave and be about my business and do something for folks? So I decided I had to leave. I let the minister know that I would not be returning. I contacted the bishop in charge. I was a member of the African Methodist Episcopal Church. It's run by bishops. I contacted the bishop and said that I was surrendering my ordination. I no longer understood myself as a theist. And it took time before I was introduced to the language of humanism. But at that point, I started investigating what it meant to think outside of theism, what it meant to do outside of theism. And that was going to be the orientation for me. I was still interested in religion, but not as a personal commitment. It was clear to me that religion over the course of human history, it had influenced and informed what people did in the world, that folks were willing to die and kill over this thing called religion. And I needed to understand what this thing was. And so I moved into the academy, took a job as teaching, and this kind of floored folks. They didn't quite understand why someone who didn't believe in God was teaching in a religion department. And the answer was simple for me. In the context of a philosophy department, someone who teaches Marxism, no one would assume they were a Marxist, simply that they knew something about Marxism. And my attitude was the same held true within the context of the study of religion. Don't assume I'm a theist simply because I teach this material, but assume that I know something about the subject matter, that I'm not proselytizing. I'm helping folks understand how this cultural development, this thing that humans have built, this thing that humans control, has influenced and informed. But I was going to do that from the context of secular humanism.
Wow, that is absolutely amazing. I feel like you're still in the pulpit there. And it's interesting that you discussed your journey and where you were preaching, and especially when you asked, about the drug crisis and what the church was going to do, and that took me back to the height of the Nation of Islam, when, especially in New York, where they were actually cleaning up drug addicts. So it wasn't like it was impossible. Were these sort of like some examples of solutions that you may have brought to your church leadership, and they just dismissed it?
Yeah, I was a young dude who didn't have answers, but I had questions, right? And my assumption was, this man had been in ministry for a very long time. How are we going to do this differently? How are we going to do this in a way that addresses the needs of folks? But what I discovered there was that there was still a commitment to a kind of otherworldly orientation, that folks may not get it here, but they'll get it up there. And that just was not satisfying for me. As a high school student, I could get with that. But at that stage of my life, that just no longer made sense. It seemed to me that we were sanctioning the demise of our people, and I couldn't get with that. So I didn't have answers, but I had questions, and these questions were not being met with satisfying answers. So rather than thinking I'm the problem, it became clear to me that this tradition is only equipped to do certain things.
Right, absolutely. Thank you for that. So you have quite an extensive and impressive collection on Black humanist thought and practice. Was this perhaps inspired by Black liberation theology that was pioneered by James Cone?
Yeah, James Cone was one of my mentors, and he was a dear friend, but we vehemently disagreed. That I spent, I'd say, the first 10 years of my career trying to get folks in the study of Black religion to recognize that there was a long-standing and robust community of folks, Black folks, who were not theists, who went about life in very different ways, and that we really needed to give attention to that you could not understand how Black folks made life meaningful, how Black folks wrestled with life meaning, how Black folks wrestled with the fundamental questions of our existence. Who are we? What are we? When are we? Why are we? We could not adequately understand how Black folks did this, the complexity of that work, and not give serious attention to Black non-believers. So I spent time building on the work of folks like Norm Allen, trying to understand how this orientation of Black non-belief develops. And you get a sense of it early on in the blues. Now, don't think 1920s race records. Think earlier formulations. And in the early blues, right? And scholars will acknowledge, in the same way we can't accurately date the spirituals, we can't accurately date the blues. So it's safe to believe that as this theistic musical tradition was developing, a tradition that was deeply committed to free thought. Deep suspicion, skepticism was also developing. So you get within the blues a different way of orientating life, a different way of thinking that isn't dependent upon something in the sky doing work for us. And then if you pay attention to Black history and you don't read it through the lens that assumes that all things Black are also all things theistic, you get a sense of disbelief. You get a sense of folks moving through the world without any kind of allegiance to God or gods. And I felt it was my responsibility in part, not only to celebrate that disbelief, but to document it as a part of the viable and vibrant nature of Black experience and Black thought.
Yes. And so as we talk about music, right, a lot of your work does include the work of hip hop music. And being a hip hop head and a huge fan, especially being from New York, what do you what are some of the works that you attribute to to critical thinking within the hip hop community? Now, of course, there can be a whole discussion about the genre itself as it has evolved, but what are some of your favorite aspects of critical thought and humanism as it pertains to hip hop?
Yeah, it seems to me that hip hop at its best is touched by the world. That is to say, hip hop at its best reflects circumstances, right? That it's wrestling with how Black folks encounter the world. It's wrestling with how Black folks experience the world. And I find that compelling. As a secular humanist, I'm also really interested in the ways in which hip hop has critiqued theistic orientations. So you get a Scarface critiquing religious traditions. You get Ice Cube critiquing religious traditions. And then you get someone like Tupac who warps and changes the Christian faith in such a way as to make it unrecognizable to most Black Christians. So rather than moving away from that blonde-haired, blue-eyed Jesus on a cross, Tupac talks in terms of himself as the Black Jesus, right? He talks about Black Jesus as the patron saint of thugs, who is not critical of what Black folks have to do to survive in a world that is anti-Black, but celebrates their ingenuity, their creativity, their attention to surviving. So it's that critique of Black religiosity that doesn't respond to Black circumstances. It's that critique of institutions that are not about the welfare of Black people that I find compelling in hip hop.
Absolutely. I remember KRS-One was also another one, and Nas did that as well.
Yeah.
So yes, and there are many instances where we do see this in Black music and culture, especially as it relates to hip hop. And I think that is very, very important for people to recognize and understand. And as we see that evolution in music, we do see explicitly atheist rappers. We've had Great and Square on the show before, and Tombstone the Dead Man, and so it's interesting to see how that has progressed. So it's there's a whole history there that if people aren't aware of, that they should be. So
and they come out of a long tradition of artistic production within African American communities that is non-theistic. Folks tend to try to cover this up. But think about the work of someone like W.E.B. Du Bois or Richard Wright or James Baldwin or Lorraine Hansberry, Alice Walker, that there is a rich tradition of free thought and humanism within Black communities that we do ourselves a disservice if we don't take seriously.
Ooh, yes, you are saying a word there. Yes, absolutely. So on to our next question. Like, how can we better apply humanism in our communities and our everyday lives and still maintain a connection to Blackness in the process?
Yeah. I think one of the things that we all have to learn to do is communicate difference. Right? That I think we suffer when it comes to communicating difference. And this is a problem for us. And so I think we have to give greater attention to how we communicate across lines of disagreement and difference. It also seems to me, within the context of secular humanism, we have an obligation to think in terms of our own ethical commitments and how we bring those to bear on the world. One, we need to continue to create safe spaces, soft places to land for folks who do not find viable life options within theistic communities. Got to give them a soft place to land. And that has to involve more than a critique of the institutions they want to leave. They want to leave the church because they know it's not working. So for us to pat ourselves on the back because we've come up with cute ways to critique churches, that doesn't get these folks anything, right? We got to give them soft ways to land, soft places to land. That has to involve giving them new language for and new practices that allow them to ritualize significant moments in life. And it seems to me humanists don't necessarily do this well. We don't come up with rituals for addressing these impactful moments of life.
Yeah, and I'll elaborate on that because many in our community, we take pride in our, intellectualism, our ability to read books, and also our academic credit, or any academic credentials. But when it comes to relating to people, there are still a lot of people in our communities that despise hip hop. They despise what is considered pop culture. And so one of the things that we've done at Black Nonbelievers is to try to incorporate that, having been raised in Black communities, having been raised as a blue collar, if you will, person, it's important that, even if it isn't ritual, creating new traditions or just something that, routines, if you will. Do you find that, it is necessary? Some people feel like they still need, or they're still deconstructing the church model and structure. And how important is it that we incorporate or encourage people to seek clinical help, to seek therapy for the things that they need, or even peer support for that, the things that people can relate to every day?
Yeah. I mean, we've done ourselves a disservice by not taking mental health seriously, right? This underlying assumption Black folks don't need therapists. We've done ourselves a disservice. That is just not a good thing. I also want to say that I'm really not in the business of padlocking churches, mosques, and synagogues. I appreciate the Constitution and what that makes available. My concern is that theistic orientations, the language, the moral and ethical concerns of theism should not dictate what takes place in public space. So the concern for me is this: to decrease the harm that theists do in the world and to decrease the harm that non-theists do in the world. That is to say, regardless of one's orientation, the concern for me is to make more vibrant, to make more real human potential within the context of a larger system of life that is vibrant and healthy.
Absolutely. So there was a question in the chat, I'll rephrase it, like, are rituals important? And that's one of the reasons why I may have said routine, but should rituals be important to our lives necessarily? Or
I think they are, whether we acknowledge it or not. They are. So if we think about rituals as repeated activity in founded space, it's things we do over and over again. We assume that only theists get to use this language. And I don't know why we surrender so much wonderful language to theists as if they own it. They don't get to own all this. And so from my vantage point, ritualizing moments of life is of fundamental importance. On one level, it helps us to develop and nurture relationships. That is to say, this is all on the horizontal plane. We're not talking about human relationships with something up there. We're talking about relationships with material existence, relationship with people, with relationship with other forms of life. That ritual gives us an opportunity to identify time and space, to set things aside that allow us to focus on particular dimensions of our individual and collective lives, to celebrate them, to rethink them, to reform them. And I think that is just vital. We make a mistake if we assume that theists get to own this sort of language.
Yes, indeed. And one of the things that I heard early on from a podcaster was that fellowship is not a religious word. The notion of, and it actually predates religion. When we have communities, as long as we have communities, people have gotten together, whether it is
Mhm.
socially or not.
Yeah,
And
yeah.
so um why is it important that we reclaim or at least redefine those words that have been so
Mhm.
heavily attributed to religion and religious
Yeah.
practice?
Because I think they still do a useful work, right? That I think the language of ritual, for example, the language of awe and wonder still describes something that is meaningful, that doesn't necessarily point to a belief in God or gods. It has to do with the nature of our relationships. So I, as a secular humanist, a non-believer, can say there is something awe-inspiring and humbling about human community. That on one level, it positions me in relationship to something that is greater than me, provides a certain sense of grounding in the world. And that, I think, is necessary. Humans are social creatures, and we need to give ourselves ways to understand and celebrate that commitment to social interaction, of connection.
Right. And so this is a very important question for me. And as I said before, that humanism and the community tends to lend itself solely to those who are academically credentialed, which can which can overlook a lot of people, especially in black and brown spaces. So is the practice of humanism, and this is a loaded question, but is the practice of humanism solely relegated to those who have either finished college, or those who are who have credentials in that space? Can everyday people practice humanism?
Of course. And within the context of Black communities, that has never been restricted to a particular class, right? That all it requires is critical thinking skills. And you don't need a college degree to have critical thinking skills. It's simply a matter of being in the world, asking questions about the world, and demanding answers. And again, you don't need a college degree for that. If you look at the history of free thought, if you look at the history of humanism within Black communities, nothing about it suggests that only folks with those sorts of academic credentials do this sort of work. It's much more complex than that. Oh, I can't hear you. You're muted.
Oh, sorry, that happens sometimes. Please tell our viewers about your new podcast, Pin Drop.
Yeah, so it's been fun. The idea behind Pin Drop is to look at how humanism gets represented and presented within human productivity, within cultural development within Black communities, right? So, how do you think about the arts from a humanist perspective? How do you think about music from a humanist perspective, right? How do you think about literature from a humanist perspective? And the goal is to help folks recognize that humanist sensibilities, humanist inclinations, humanist desires are deeply embedded in the workings of Black life, of brown life. It's deeply embedded in how we go about developing culture. And so it's snapshots of that relationship between humanism and cultural developments.
Awesome. And how often do you where can people find it, and how often do you air?
It's available wherever they get their podcast, and there's a new episode every Wednesday.
Nice, nice. This has been a wonderful conversation, Tony. I am so glad that you were able to join us today. We will be sharing the links to your podcast, and where people can follow you on social media. We encourage everyone to check out Tony's work. It is amazing. And thank you so much for being a guest on In the Cut. It was a pleasure to speak with you.
Oh, it was my pleasure. You my people. So anytime.
Yes, awesome. Thank you so much. And let me just say that when I first got in this community, you were one of the first people I had learned about. And it was just really good to see that there was already a catalog of work from Black humanists and atheists and free thinkers, and that has now increased over the years.
Oh
So
yeah.
that
Oh
has
yeah.
been great. I just really want to thank you for being an inspiration to our work at Black Nonbelievers as well.
Oh, you're very kind. Very kind. And a shout
Thank
out to Norm Allen.
Yes, yes,
We go
yes.
way back, and he has been extremely helpful over the years.
Yes, I had the opportunity to meet Norm when he visited Atlanta a few years ago. So it was an honor to meet him as well. And for those of you who aren't aware, Norm Allen Jr. Was the founder of African Americans for Humanism, which was a program of the Center for Inquiry, lasted for 25 years and produced a huge catalog of information. And I had the opportunity, along with others, to be featured in their billboard campaign in 2012, which was about a 7-city campaign. It was wonderful. And so we always pay tribute to those who came before us, and those who are, and try to pave the way for those who are coming after us.
Yeah.
So that has been very, very important. And especially especially since we're in Black History Month, that is really, really amazing. So thank you so much once again, Tony, for being here with us. It has been an absolute honor. I don't even say pleasure. It's been an honor to have you here with us and to have our viewers listen to you.
Well, thank you so much for the opportunity to chat.
No problem. Thank you so much. Thank you once again. Please follow Dr. Tony Pinn on Twitter at Anthony_Pinn. Please do visit his website at anthonypinn.com, and do check out Pinn Drop on OnlySky Media or wherever you may find your favorite podcasts. So here is the part of the show where we do our upcoming announcements. We have a jam-packed event calendar to wrap up February. Tomorrow in Atlanta, join us as we go see the musical adaptation of Mufaro's Beautiful Daughters at the Synchronicity Theater. We will be going to the 5 p.m. show, which is pay what you can. So whether you can pay $5 or $25, please do join us, which is in Midtown Atlanta. Please do join us for a wonderful, wonderful time. The story of Mufaro's Beautiful Daughters was written by a Brooklyn-born Brooklyn writer, John Steptoe. And so a Black author, African story, and I am looking forward to seeing the musical adaptation of this story. Please do join our new affiliate in Philadelphia as they host a virtual meet and greet on the 24th at 7 o'clock. Whether you live there or you plan to visit, do stay up to date on their events. A shout out to Hamid, who is watching right now. Please do get in touch with him if you are interested in being a part of the Philly affiliate. Please do join us for that. So also on February 25th, I am really, really excited about this. Please do join us for a Black History event, which it will be live on Zoom, titled Black Freethinkers, We've Been Here, which will feature Chris Cameron, author of Black Freethinkers, A History of African-American Secularism, and Cynthia McDonald, who is our new Chicago affiliate leader. So, and I will be moderating that. Registration is required, it's free to attend. So we hope you will join us for that. And after that, do join the Chicago affiliate the following day for brunch at the Bronzeville Winery for Black Restaurant Week at 2 p.m. Central. There are limited slots available. The link will be shared, as all links are shared in the chat. So you want to RSVP as soon as possible to join our Chicago group. And last but not least, for the month of February, do join our Metro Detroit affiliate on the 28th for the Black History in Canada virtual event at 2 p.m. Eastern. Once you RSVP, you will receive the link to register. So please do join us for that. And as I'm wearing our Ocean Blue, BNC Con 2022 is available for booking. It is still available. You can make your initial deposit. We will be on the new Carnival celebration, and the convention will take place from November 4th through the 13th of this year, and our sale dates will be from the 5th through the 12th. Our special featured guests will be Matt Dillahunty, Candace Gorham, yours truly, and we're trying to get Dallas Gospel, but hopefully, and more. Do visit the website to book. The link is in the chat. Again, deposits are required, but you can still make your initial deposit, and we will have flexible payment plans throughout the majority of the year. So please do contact us if you need to make payment arrangements. Also, if you are looking for a great gift to give at any time of the year, pick up a copy of Name Dropping, which was created by previous In the Cut guest Deanna Williams and her best friend Jesus Reyna. Name Dropping is the frustratingly fun movie trivia card game. The link will be posted in the chat to purchase at namedropping.com. Well, that wraps it up for this episode of In the Cut. We hope you enjoyed the show, and Tony, it was amazing. And we hope you will join us again for more episodes. And please do feel free to check out previous episodes. As a reminder, we air every first and third Saturday of each month. Please like this video, subscribe to our channel, and spread the word. And also do follow us on Facebook at BlackNonbelievers, where we also stream this show. We are also on Instagram at BNonbelievers Inc. and Twitter at BNonbelievers, where the B and the N are capitalized. Oh, please do once again subscribe to us on YouTube. We are getting closer and closer to monetizing our channel, so we'll be able to offer super chats, and you'll be able to support through our channel. So we thank you for tuning in and watching previous episodes of the show. Presentations from previous events like our 10th anniversary, Women of Color Beyond Belief, our 5th anniversary, and more. And last but not least, please do learn more and make your tax-deductible donation for our website at blacknonbelievers.org/donate. We announced before that Amazon Prime is ending in a couple of days, and we thank everyone who has supported us through that program over the years. It has helped tremendously, but there are still other support options available. And one of the programs and one of the things that your donations helps us with is our sponsorship of the Hurston Scholarship, which was named after Zora Neale Hurston. We will be partnering this year once again with the Secular Student Alliance for the 2023 scholarship, which we have been supporting since 2020, and this is for Black college students. More information on how to apply for the scholarship will be available soon. And if you're a student or if you know a student at a campus, visit the website at secularstudents.org to find or start a student chapter. And if you are a student at a historically Black college or university or HBCU, we definitely want to help facilitate that. So please do contact us or the Secular Student Alliance to start a student chapter group there. And finally, if you want to represent BN even more, you can pick up your swag on our website. You can pick up t-shirts, hoodies, mugs, shot glasses, and more from our online store. You can find that at our website, and the link will be shared in the chat. Thank you so much once again. We hope you enjoy the rest of your day. Take care and see you next time.